was Leslie Perrin.
Now, how did you get that job?
I don't know, I just flopped into it. They
okay.
came one day and they took 6 guys out of the platoon that were going through driver's course. And that was it, because I could drive a car.
Well, I know the military is strange.
Yeah.
I mean, almost anything can happen.
You know, but they taught you how to drive a truck their way.
The Army.
The truck was the Army way. A car, as long as I could drive a car, and it was a stick shift because you didn't have automatic transmissions then.
So you drove the General?
I drove the General for about 4 weeks, and I didn't show up on time one day to pick him up, so the next day I was on KP peeling potatoes, which wasn't supposed to be punishment, but evidently it was. And that day, they came around from the Airborne looking for volunteers. And everybody said, you don't volunteer for anything in the service. Because when they ask for a volunteer, you're either going to dig a ditch, or you're going to police the grounds, or something else.
I ended up on a laundry pile a mile high.
I can understand. Well, we stood there in line, and of course, you had your anti-Semitism in the military, just like you had any place else.
Let's spend a moment on that, because that's a very, let's go back to your childhood, because I'd like to go into that. New York has a large Jewish population.
I grew up in a strictly Jewish neighborhood.
So, when did you kind of contact in
In school, in junior high school, and in the boys' school.
Name calling, or was it on a
well, you had a borderline. I lived on 9th Street. The borderline was 12th Street for the Italians. On 1st Avenue was the Polacks. Below Housen Street, you had Little Italy, so we were in the middle of all the Italians. So, you know, it was flagrant. It was flagrant anti-Semitism.
So you really couldn't cross over into there?
No, you had to be 3 or 4 guys, otherwise you were going to get beat up.
Right.
Many a weekend I had a black eye or a broken nose.
So now you're in the Army, and I just didn't even, you know, we're in a different time. I hope we're in a different time on problems like this, hopefully. Was there this type of thing? I mean, if your name was in the South there and your name was Ginsburg, I mean, obviously.
You were in trouble.
Were you? They really
you were in
gave
trouble.
it to you.
I was lucky my name was Miller. They really didn't know what my religion was,
right.
And I got away with a lot. Of course, I had a couple of guys in my outfit that we called crackers. They were from Kentucky and Tennessee and stuff like that. And one of them had been a washout. He had broken a leg going through jump school, so they washed him out and sent him back to infantry school. Anyway, he said to me, you don't have the nerve to join. No Jew is going to join the paratroopers, and I'll bet you that you can't do it. I said, well, what's the bet? And he said $500, and I bet him, and I won $500.
You collect?
Because I collected it, because I made it, and he broke his leg again, and he washed out again.
But it would be interesting because your name is not immediately recognized.
That's right.
So that, yeah, it must have been hurting at times when you hear these. I mean, you can't fight everybody.
No, but you have a lot of fights.
Yeah, I mean,
until you learn that you have to start to take it with a grain of salt. Otherwise, you'll be fighting every day in a week.
Was there, you know, sometimes these things are a little bit more subtle. I mean, sometimes it's just, you know, outright. But with the officers, was there any anti-Semitism?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was there.
Oh, yeah.
It was there. You know.
I think I was fortunate. I had when I went to parachute school, of course, I was in jump class 48, which is the 48th class going through parachute school. And every week was a number higher. Of course, when the war ended, I guess they were up in the 150s or the 160s. But every class had approximately 1,000 people, 1,200 people to start through jump school, of which they qualified at the end of 4 weeks, 200. The rest washed out.
Really tough then.
Yeah.
Really tough. Again, how long was the training for the Airborne?
4 weeks of jump school, and you had something going for you because when you finished your 5th jump, the next day you got your wings and a 10-day furlough. That was it.
All right. Of course, I'm going to ask you about your first jump.
I don't think you realize what it's all about for the first jump. Well, let's look at it this way. You go through the first week of physical training, all PT, 8 hours a day.
Physical training.
Physical training. And then they start to get you into complete reflex condition.
A little bit more on that. What does that mean?
Well, reflexes, somebody would be walking by, a non-com or a drill instructor, and he'd walk by and all of a sudden you'd hear jab, 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 jab. Meant that.
Grabbing your...
No, jab is this, and if you said jab, jab, it was 2 times.
Oh, I see.
And if you didn't do it fast enough for him, you did 50 push-ups. That was a good reflex because it gave you a quick reflex to be able to think quickly on what you had to do. The second week was in a 34-foot high mock tower where they get you acclimated to the parachute harness. And
let me ask you, did anyone...
they quit.
Right then and there?
Right then and there at the 34-foot tower.
All right.
And it's nothing, because you go out the tower, you're on a trolley wire in the harness, and you wind up in a sawdust bank.
But some people just weren't...
They couldn't get out the door.
So
They just froze right then and there, and that was it. It was the idea, look down 34 feet and see 34 feet of space and say, I'll break my legs, and walk away. And
so of course you got past that thing.
Yeah,
how many times did you kind of do, or was it almost endless number of times doing that?
Oh, I guess
I mean,
you did it 7-8 times a day for 5 days.
So you really...
Well, it really was to get you used to the opening shock of the parachute. That's what it's all about. And then, of course, they start to instruct you to pack your parachutes, which in combat you don't do, but for practice they teach you to pack your
You
chutes.
don't pack in combat?
No.
Someone else does this?
Riggers.
I'm not sure I like that idea.
That's right. I didn't. I did my own.
Why did they do that?
Well, they figure your training and everything else, but you learn very, very quickly. There's very little that can go wrong with a parachute and packing if it's stowed right. By stowing, it means folding the silk in a piano-type fold and stowing the lines back and forth, held in the pack by retaining bands, which are rubber bands, because they just pop right out from the flow.
I would think I would want to do my own parachute. Did most of us trust other people to do them? I mean, in the real world out there? Or
in the real world out there, you took a rigger's chute.
You did?
Yeah.
No.
Well, anyway.
Oh, so I'm sorry, we're back to
getting
ready for the first jump and all.
For the first jump. And the next week, they take us to the 250-foot tower to get you used to height. Like the parachute jump at Coney Island.
Is that about 250?
That's,
so we can kind
that's 250
so we
foot
can
high.
imagine.
Yeah.
Some people wash out at that stage. Or
Well,
not too
that's
many,
where
I
you
think.
start to get injuries.
Oh.
Because the first time you go up is on the cable seat, but it's a harness where the chute comes down in a cable, and all you do is feel the bouncing when you get down to the bottom. You don't even touch the ground. Then they send you up in the towers. They send the chute up 6 foot or 10 foot below the rung where it releases you, and you're holding a piece of paper, and they'll say, number 1, drop your slip of paper, drop your slip of paper, and they tell you, well, slip to the left or slip to the right or slip to the front. By slipping, it means pulling the risers in the front or pulling the risers on each side, so that when the chute billows out full of air, you start to slip to the area where you want to go.
And they can do that with that
Yeah.
cycle. They can do that.
And this, of course, was the old parachute, not like they jump now with the
And they were
square.
made of real silk.
Silk or nylon.
A nylon was coming in.
Yeah.
Right.
The lines were nylon already.
They were
All the
already.
shroud lines were nylon. And then in the afternoon or morning, whichever group you were in, you started to pack your chute for the first jump. I think for my first jump, it took me...
No, we're talking off the tower or...
No, the tower is no packing at all. It's
No.
a big billowy harness that gets hooked up to cables.
And you're learning to go left, right, forward,
yeah.
backwards. All right.
All right, now, either the afternoon or the morning, depending on when you were off the towers, they're teaching you to pack your chute, and you start to pack it for your first jump. Took me like 3.5 or 4 hours to pack my main chute, for the first jump, and took me about an hour and a half or so to pack my reserve.
Why so long?
Everything had to be right.
Okay.
Everything had to be right.
And somebody obviously is watching, I
Yeah.
assume. They're really being careful with
They're
this.
showing you how to fold the panels, how to flip them, how to dust them, and
Now,
everything
what do you mean
else.
by dusting?
Well, when a chute is used, there's a certain amount of dirt in the air, and it gets into them. So when you're billowing the silk, packing it for the jump, you're flipping the panels to get any kind of excess dust or leaves or anything out of the chute. Because when you do land on the ground, they don't give every man a brand new chute. You're using used parachutes.
How many times would a parachute kind of last? Is it just...
Indefinitely.
Oh, really?
Indefinitely.
Yeah, as long as, indefinitely. Could they... Now, I'm not being facetious at all, Mr. Miller, but could they be patched? In other words, refixed?
They were. Each panel, a 28-foot parachute, which is a jumping chute at that time, has quarter-section panels where you could see the stitching. They could be repaired.
They could be repaired.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what
They could be repaired.
All right. So now, how did you sleep that night?
Well, the night for the first jump, you really didn't know what it was all about. I mean, you know, you get into the plane, and it's a tap jump.
All right. What's that mean?
The tap jump is that when you're in the plane and it's flying over the drop zone, they tell you, stick get ready, stick stand up, stick hook up, and you hook the static line to the cable in the plane. And there were two types of planes that we used, the C-47, which is a DC-3 Goonie bird, and the C-46. And the C-46 is a reverse door plane. We went out
Now,
the
what do you
plane,
mean by reverse door plane?
the door was on the other side.
All right.
And everything was practiced with this DC-3, the C-47, because that's a right-hand door going out the plane. So because you're holding the line this way. If you're going out the other plane, you're automatically switching to the other side.
Why did they have the difference of the,
They weren't making the planes fast enough because even though they were used for troop carrier, they were still used for transportation and aerial supply. And don't forget, a plane had to tow a glider. They really weren't coming through as fast as
Yeah, because of the, obviously, wartime
Yeah.
conditions. So there you are in line.
Here we are in line, and
Anybody refuse?
not the first jump.
Not the first jump.
Not the first jump. And they tell you to stand in the door, and you shuffle down, and you turn, and you stand in the door, and you have a position that you're taught to stand in the door, and they tell you, don't look down. Look straight out. And of course, they've taught you that when you jump out the door, you're going straight out sideways, and the wind will turn your body so that your back is towards the front of the plane, and you're falling down. Now, you're going to fall 105 feet from the time you leave the plane until the chute snaps open. That's the length of the static line, the canopy, and the shroud lines to the backpack. It takes between 2.5 and 3 seconds for the parachute to open from the time you leave the plane. So you say 1,000, 2,000, between 2 and 3, the chute should open. If it doesn't open, you're supposed to pull your reserve. Anyway, before that,
Well, how many people were on the plane to
16.
jump? 16 to jump.
16 to jump.
Oh, okay.
And the 8 on one side and 8 on the other side. So that by the time, if it was an actual combat jump, by the time 16 goes out the plane door, he's on a dead run. He's running so fast to keep up, he can't move fast enough.
No, the 16th fellow there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. But like I say, this was a tap jump. And you stood in the door, and as soon as they say don't look down, you automatically look down.
Human nature being what
That's
it is.
right. And there you see at the corner of the field, half a dozen ambulances,
How high up are you?
1,200 feet.